Single mom gives half of her own snack to a strange girl, but didn't know she was the billionaire's daughter. The school gate was crowded with hurried parents and noisy children. Maisie stood still in the same spot, her blonde hair shining in the afternoon sun. Her light blue eyes searched for a familiar face among all those people. Daddy said he would come today. She clutched the strap of her pink backpack tighter. The teacher walked by her, smiled and waved, but didn't stop. The other children ran to their parents, cars, yelling about what they had done in art class. Maisie kept waiting. The commotion at the gate began to die down. Fewer cars, fewer voices, fewer hurried footsteps. "Maisie, dear, has your father not arrived yet?" asked the school secretary. "He's coming, he said he was," Maisie answered softly, but with certainty in her voice. The secretary looked at her watch and made a worried face. "I'm going to call your nanny, okay?" Maisie shook her head. She didn't want them to call Mrs. Williams. She wanted Daddy to come running, apologizing, saying the traffic was terrible. She wanted him to ask about the drawing she made of their family, just the two of them, because that's how it had always been. But the phone was already ringing in the secretary's hand. "Mrs. Williams, this is the school. Yes, Maisie is still here." The gate became empty. The secretary went back inside the school after saying the nanny was on her way. Maisie sat on the stone steps, placed her backpack on her lap, and waited. That's when she saw the woman. She was across the street, standing near a tree. She didn't seem to be waiting for anyone. She wasn't looking at her phone like the other adults did. She was just watching. The woman had brown hair tied in a simple ponytail. She wore a light blue shirt and jeans. Nothing special. But there was something about her that made Maisie pay attention. Maybe it was the way she stood there, quiet, unhurried. Maisie pretended to be rummaging through her backpack but kept looking. The woman had a small bag in her hand. Every now and then, she would look at Maisie and then look away as if she didn't want to seem intrusive. Time passed slowly. Maisie started to feel her stomach rumble. She hadn't eaten her school snack because she was saving it to share with her dad on the way home. He always asked about the school food, and she always answered that it was so-so. It was a conversation they had every day. But there was no conversation today. The woman crossed the street. Maisie pretended not to see, but she followed every step. The woman stopped a few feet away, as if considering whether to approach or not. "Hi," she said, in a soft voice. Maisie looked up. "Hi, are you waiting for someone?" "My daddy." The answer came out automatically. The woman nodded, as if that made all the sense in the world. "Sometimes they run late, don't they?" "Yeah." Maisie didn't know if she should keep talking to a stranger, but the woman's voice was kind. "I'm Elise," the woman said, still keeping a respectful distance. "Maisie, that's a pretty name," Elise smiled. "Did you have a busy day at school?" "I made a drawing of my family." Maisie opened her backpack and took out a sheet of paper. "Want to see?" Elise moved a little closer and crouched down to be at Maisie's level. In the drawing, there were two stick figures, one big and one small. The big one had short hair and a tie. The small one had long hair and a blue dress. "It's beautiful," Elise said. "You two look happy in the drawing." "It's because my daddy works a lot, but he loves me." Maisie carefully put the drawing away. "But today, he forgot to pick me up." The words came out before she realized it. It wasn't something she usually told strangers. But Elise had a way of listening that made the words come out on their own. "I understand," Elise said. "Sometimes adults get so worried about other things that they forget what's most important." Maisie looked at her with curiosity. "Do you forget important things too?" "Sometimes." Elise reached into the bag she was carrying. "Says, but today I remembered to bring a snack." She took out a small sandwich wrapped in aluminum foil. It was cut into perfect triangles, and you could see the melted cheese at the edges. "It's just a small piece, but it's warm," Elise said, offering half of the sandwich. Maisie looked at the food and then at Elise. Her stomach rumbled again, and she realized she was very hungry. But more than that, she realized someone was being kind to her on a day when nothing was going right. "Thank you so much, ma'am," Maisie said, taking the sandwich. "You can just call me Elise," the woman smiled. "And no need to thank me. Everyone needs a little snack sometimes." The sandwich was indeed warm, the cheese was perfectly melted, and the bread had a homemade taste that reminded Maisie of something good she couldn't quite place. "It's delicious," Maisie said. "I'm glad." Elise ate her own half slowly, without rushing. "Do you like school?" "I do. The teacher is nice. Today she taught us about primary colors." Maisie licked the cheese off her fingers. "Did you know that if you mix blue and yellow, you get green?" "Yes, I did. Did you try it?" "I did. I made a really pretty green tree." Maisie swung her legs, which didn't reach the ground. "My daddy said he was going to ask about the drawing today, but..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "I'm sure he'll want to see it when he gets home," Elise said. Maisie nodded, but she wasn't so sure. Daddy always came home tired. He always had something important to deal with on the phone. He always seemed to be thinking about other places. "Elise." "Yes. Do you have kids?" Elise hesitated for a second. "I have a daughter. She's your age. Where is she?" "At her grandmother's today, but tomorrow she's coming with me to the park." Elise looked around. "There's a park nearby with some cool playground equipment." Maisie followed Elise's gaze and saw the park across the square. It was a place she always passed but never stopped to play. Daddy was always in a hurry. "What's she like, your daughter?" "She is..." Elise smiled in a different way. "She's full of energy, loves to invent games, and she has the same hair as you." "Blonde?" "Blonde and shiny, just like yours." Elise looked at Maisie's hair. "And light-colored eyes too." Maisie was curious. "What's her name?" "Sienna." "That's a pretty name," Maisie said, repeating what Elise had said about her name. Elise chuckled softly. "She would like you." "You think so?" "I'm sure of it." It was at that moment that Maisie heard hurried footsteps. It was Mrs. Williams, the nanny, walking quickly toward the school. Her face was red, as it always was when she was worried or late. "Maisie, honey, I'm so sorry for the delay." Mrs. Williams stopped to catch her breath. "The traffic was terrible, and I couldn't find a place to park." Maisie stood up and grabbed her backpack. She looked at Elise, who had also stood up. "Thanks for the snack," Maisie said. "It was my pleasure," Elise replied. "Take care of your green tree, okay?" Maisie smiled. "I will." Mrs. Williams looked at Elise with a bit of suspicion, but nodded politely before taking Maisie's hand. "Let's go, dear. Your father should be home soon." As they walked toward the car, Maisie looked back. Elise was still there, waving. "Who was that woman?" Mrs. Williams asked. "A friend," Maisie said. "A friend? But you just met her." Maisie thought about it. Sometimes people become friends quickly. Mrs. Williams opened the car door and helped Maisie get in. "And what did you talk about?" She gave me a snack. "Anne told me about her daughter." Maisie buckled her seatbelt. "She was nice to me. She listened." The nanny started the car and began to drive. "Listened to what?" "Just listened." Maisie rested her head against the window. "You know, Mrs. Williams, when was the last time someone just stopped to listen to you?" The question caught the nanny by surprise. She looked in the rearview mirror and saw Maisie watching the houses go by. "I don't know, honey. It's been a while." "Exactly," Maisie said. She really listened. She wasn't looking at her phone or anything. When they got home, her dad's car wasn't in the driveway. "He's not here yet," said Mrs. Williams. They went inside the house. It was a beautiful house, with big sofas and a huge TV. It had paintings on the walls and flowers that Mrs. Williams always watered, but sometimes it felt a bit empty, as if it were waiting for more people to feel complete. Maisie went to her room to do her homework. She drew another tree, this time paying attention to the colors, blue with yellow. A pretty green, just like the one she had made at school. When she finished, she heard the sound of the car in the garage. Daddy was home. She ran to the living room with the drawing in her hand, ready to tell him about her day, about the colors, about Elise and the warm sandwich. Clark came into the house already on the phone. He waved at Maisie, gave a 1-minute signal with his finger, and continued the conversation. "Yes, I understand, but we need to resolve this today." "No," It can't wait until tomorrow. Maisie stood in the living room, holding the drawing. Mrs. Williams appeared in the kitchen and whispered, "How about dinner first, honey?" "Your dad seems busy." Maisie nodded and put the drawing away. She ate dinner alone in the kitchen, listening to her dad's voice coming and going throughout the house, always on the phone. When he finally appeared in the kitchen, Maisie had already finished eating. "Hi, Princess. How was your day?" He kissed the top of her head, but Maisie could tell he was distracted. His eyes kept looking at the phone in his hand. "It was good, Daddy. I learned about colors today and—" The phone rang. Clark looked at the screen with a face that said he couldn't ignore it. "Sorry, Maisie. It's work. It's important." He answered before he even finished speaking. "Hello?" "Yes, I was expecting your call." Maisie sat at the table, watching her dad pace back and forth, talking about things she didn't understand. Mrs. Williams came to get the empty plate. "Your dad works a lot, doesn't he?" she whispered. "Yeah," Maisie said, "but today he forgot to pick me up from school." "Oh, honey." Mrs. Williams crouched down next to Maisie's chair. "Sometimes adults get so preoccupied that—" "I know," Maisie interrupted. Elise said the same thing. The woman from the park. "Yeah, she said that sometimes adults forget what's most important." Maisie looked at her dad, who was still talking on the phone. "Why do you think I'm important to my daddy?" The question came out in a whisper, but Mrs. Williams heard it. She held Maisie's small hands. "Of course you're important, honey. You're the most important thing in the world to him." "Then why does he always have something more important to do?" Mrs. Williams didn't know what to answer. That night, after Clark finally put his phone away and helped Maisie brush her teeth, she tried one more time. "Daddy, I made a green tree today. Want to see it?" "Of course, Princess. We'll look at it tomorrow, okay? Daddy is very tired today." Maisie nodded and got into bed. Clark kissed her forehead and turned off the light. In the darkness of her room, Maisie thought about Elise. She thought about how she had stopped everything she was doing just to talk. She thought about the warm sandwich and her kind way of speaking. She thought about Sienna, Elise's daughter, who had hair just like hers. On the other side of town, in a smaller, simpler house, Elise was also thinking. She had prepared dinner for herself and Sienna, who had come back from her grandmother's house full of stories to tell. While her daughter talked about the games she had invented, Elise thought about the blonde girl she had found waiting at school. There was something in Maisie's blue eyes that had touched her, a loneliness that Elise knew well. The loneliness of someone who wants to talk, but no one has time to listen. It was a loneliness Elise had felt many times when Sienna was a baby, when she was just another single mom trying to handle everything on her own, when everyone around seemed to have someone, except her. "Mommy, are you listening?" Sienna nudged Elise's arm. "Of course, sweetie. You were telling me about the game with Grandma." "Yeah, but you were thinking about something else." Sienna tilted her head. "What were you thinking about?" Elise smiled. Her daughter always noticed when her mind drifted. "I was thinking about a girl I met today. A girl my age. Your age. Blonde hair, light eyes, just like you." Sienna became interested. "What's her name?" "Maisie." "Pretty. Where did you meet her?" Elise told her about the encounter at the school, about the girl waiting alone, about the shared sandwich. She didn't tell her about the loneliness she saw in Maisie's eyes, because Sienna was still too young to understand such things. "Do you think she would like to play with me?" Sienna asked. "I think so." "Can we go look for her tomorrow?" Elise hesitated. She didn't usually get involved in other people's lives. She had learned to protect herself, not to create expectations. But there was something about Maisie that made her want to break her own rules. "Maybe we'll stop by the park tomorrow," she said. "And who knows? Who knows, she might be there." Sienna clapped her hands. It would be nice to have a new friend. That night, after putting Sienna to bed, Elise stood in the kitchen thinking. She looked out the window and saw the lights of the other houses. In each one, there were families having dinner, watching TV, talking about their day. For a long time, she had stopped wondering what it would be like to be part of one of those families. She had gotten used to the simple life she had built for herself and Sienna. It wasn't bad. It was even good, most of the time, but today, after meeting Maisie, something had changed. Maybe it was the way the girl had accepted the sandwich with such care. Maybe it was the way she spoke about her father with love, even though she was hurt. Elise decided she would go back to the park the next day. She would take Sienna. And who knows, maybe she would find Maisie there. Because sometimes the best things in life start with a small act of kindness, with a small piece of a warm sandwich, with someone who stops to really listen. And maybe, just maybe, that meeting was the beginning of something bigger than she could imagine. The park was full of golden leaves scattered on the ground. Elise held Sienna's hand as they walked toward the playground. The little blonde girl skipped with excitement, her light blue eyes shining with the promise of a new adventure. "Will she be here, Mommy?" Sienna asked for the third time. "I don't know, sweetie, maybe." Elise scanned the park with her eyes. "But if she's not, we'll just play together, okay?" Sienna nodded, but kept searching. She had spent the whole night thinking about the girl her mother had described. A girl just like her, with blonde hair and light eyes. Someone who liked to draw green trees and who might like to play too. That's when she saw her. On the other side of the park, a girl was sitting alone on a swing. She wasn't swinging. She was just sitting there, pushing dry leaves with her feet. "Mommy, is that her?" Sienna squeezed Elise's hand. Elise smiled. It was indeed Maisie. She was wearing a light pink coat and her hair was down, shining in the morning sun. She seemed to be waiting for someone. "It is... Do you want to go talk to her?" Sienna hesitated for a second. She was brave most of the time, but meeting someone new always gave her butterflies in her stomach. What if the girl didn't want to play? What if she was boring? What if they had nothing in common? "Let's go together," Elise said, noticing her daughter's hesitation. They approached slowly. Maisie was distracted, fiddling with a leaf shaped like a star. When she heard the footsteps, she looked up. "Elise." Maisie's voice sounded surprised and happy at the same time. "You came." "Of course I came." "This is Sienna." Elise placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Sienna, this is Maisie." The two girls looked at each other. They really did look alike. Blonde hair, light eyes, the same height, but Sienna had a more restless energy, while Maisie seemed quieter, more observant. "Hi," Sienna said, a bit shy. "Hi," Maisie replied. They stood like that for a few seconds, studying each other. Elise sat on a nearby bench, giving them space to get to know one another. "Your mum told me you like to draw," Sienna said, breaking the silence. "I do. Yesterday, I made a green tree. I learned that blue with yellow makes green." "Really, I didn't know that." Sienna was impressed. "Can you teach me?" "I can." Maisie smiled. "What do you like to play?" "Everything." Sienna brightened up. "I like to invent games. Yesterday, I invented a game of jumping on rocks at my grandma's house." "How does it go?" Sienna looked around and saw the leaves scattered on the ground. "I can invent a new one right now." "With these leaves?" Maisie got off the swing, interested. "How?" "We can pretend they're islands, and we have to jump from one to another without falling on the ground. The ground is the sea, full of sharks." Maisie laughed. "Sharks in the park? Imaginary sharks," Sienna explained seriously. "The worst kind of all." "Oh, okay." Maisie joined in the game. "And what if we fall? Then you become a shark too." The two of them started arranging the larger leaves on the ground, creating a path. Elise watched from a distance, smiling. It was amazing how children could turn anything into an adventure. "Ready," said Sienna. "You go first." Maisie hesitated. "What if I fall?" "You won't fall. And if you do, it's okay. It's just a game." Maisie took a deep breath and started jumping from leaf to leaf. On the third jump, she stepped off the leaf. "Ah, the sharks got me," she shouted, getting into the spirit of the game. Sienna laughed so hard she almost fell too. "Now you're a shark too. What's it like being a shark?" "You have to try to catch whoever is jumping on the islands." Sienna started her route, jumping more carefully. She managed to reach the end, but Maisie caught her right on the last leaf. "Gotcha!" "No fair, I had already made it." "Yes, it is. Now we're sharks together." They laughed and started all over again. They invented new rules: sharks that could fly, islands that disappeared, magic bridges made of twigs. The shyness had completely vanished. After playing for an hour, they sat under a tree to rest. Elise approached with a bag. "Anyone want a snack?" "I do," they both said at the same time, and laughed again. Elise took out homemade cookies and juice boxes from the bag. The girls ate in silence for a few minutes, still out of breath from playing. "These cookies are delicious," Maisie said. "Did you make them, Elise?" "I made them last night. Sienna helped me." "I cracked 3 eggs," Sienna said proudly, "and I licked the bowl." "I've never made cookies," Maisie confessed. "My daddy isn't a very good cook." "You can come make them with us," Sienna offered. "It's easy and fun." Maisie looked at Elise, who nodded. "Of course you can. Anytime you want." "Really? Really?" Maisie smiled in a way Elise hadn't seen the day before. It was a looser, happier smile. "Look," Sienna pointed to the ground. "This leaf is shaped like a heart." "It's true," Maisie picked up the leaf. "It's perfect." "Let's look for more leaves with different shapes," Sienna suggested. They spread all the leaves they had collected on the ground. There was one that looked like a fish, another that resembled a butterfly, and several that didn't look like anything, but they decided they were aliens or baby dinosaurs. "This one looks like a house," Maisie said, holding a large, round leaf. "And this is the family that lives in the house," Sienna said, gathering several small leaves. "The daddy, the mommy, and the 2 daughters." Maisie stared at the leaves. "2 daughters?" "Yep. Sisters." Sienna arranged the smaller leaves near the larger one. "They play together every day." "It must be nice to have a sister," Maisie said softly. "You don't have siblings?" "No, just me and my daddy." Sienna thought for a moment. "You know what we can do." "What?" "We can be pretend sisters." Maisie looked up, interested. "What do you mean?" "We can pretend we're sisters, do everything sisters do, play together, share secrets, protect each other from sharks." Maisie laughed at the last part. "Would you be up for that?" "Of course, you're nice, and we look alike." They looked each other in the eye, serious for a moment. It was as if they were making an important pact. "Okay," Maisie said. "Pretend sisters." "Pretend sisters," Sienna confirmed. They held hands and swung their arms, sealing the deal. Elise watched from afar, her heart aching in a good way. It had been a long time since she had seen Sienna so happy with someone her own age, and Maisie was completely different from the shy girl she had met the day before. "Elise," Sienna shouted, "Maisie is my pretend sister now." "That's great," Elise approached. "And what do pretend sisters do?" "They play together every day," Maisie said. "And share cookies," Sienna added. "And protect each other from imaginary sharks," Maisie finished, making Sienna laugh. The sun was higher now, and Elise realized they had spent more time at the park than she had planned, but she was in no hurry, not when she saw the 2 girls so happy. "How about we play on the swings for a little while?" she suggested. "Good idea." The girls ran to the swings side by side. As they swung, they talked about school, about colors, about the games they could invent. They discovered they both liked pizza, hated broccoli, and loved stories about princesses who saved dragons instead of being saved by them. "I wish I were a princess like that," Maisie said. "We can play that," said Sienna. "I can be the warrior princess and you can be the magic princess. And what does the magic princess do?" "She does magic to help the warrior princess, and together they save the kingdom." "I like it." When the sun started to get too strong, Elise suggested they leave. The girls protested but obeyed. As they walked toward the park exit, Maisie grew quieter. Reality was setting in. Soon she would be back home, where her dad would probably be working, and she would be alone until dinner. "Elise," she said, stopping before they reached the gate. "Yes, dear." Maisie looked at Sienna, then at Elise, and gathered the courage to ask the question that had been hammering in her head since the game had started. "Are you guys coming tomorrow too?" Elise looked at the hope shining in Maisie's blue eyes. then at Sienna, who was nodding her head vigorously. "Please, Mommy, can we come?" "Of course we can," Elise said, smiling. "If you want us to, Maisie." "I do," Maisie replied quickly. "I really do." "Then it's a date," Sienna said, taking her new pretend sister's hand. "Tomorrow we'll continue the shark game." "And make more cookies," Maisie added. "And invent more games," Sienna finished. As they said goodbye at the park gate, Maisie felt different. For the first time in a long time, she had something to look forward to the next day. Someone who wanted to play with her, someone who really listened to her. And for the first time, she didn't feel alone. Clark glanced at the clock on the car's dashboard and winced. 3:30 in the afternoon. He still had 2 meetings for the day, but something made him cancel everything and leave the office early. Maybe it was the memory of Maisie waiting alone the day before. Maybe it was the guilt that hadn't stopped nagging him since yesterday. He drove down the school street, but didn't see Maisie at the gate. Strange. Whenever he managed to pick her up, she was there, sitting on the steps, waiting. That's when he heard laughter coming from the park. Clark parked the car and walked toward the sounds. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. Maisie was sitting on the ground under a tree, laughing in a way he hadn't seen in a long time. A loose, happy, unhurried laugh. Next to her, a blonde girl who looked very much like his daughter was also laughing, and a woman was sitting behind them, running her fingers through their hair, picking out dry leaves that had gotten stuck in the strands. Clark watched for a few seconds. There was something about the scene that touched him in a strange way. Maybe it was the naturalness of it all, the way Maisie seemed completely at ease, the way the woman cared for the 2 girls with such affection. When was the last time he had brushed Maisie's hair? "Daddy!" Maisie saw him and waved, but she didn't get up and run as she always did. "You're early." "I am, Princess." Clark approached. The woman looked up at him, and Clark recognized kindness in her gaze. "Sorry to interrupt." "You're not interrupting anything," said Elise, smiling. "I'm Elise and this is Sienna." "Clark." He nodded. "Maisie's dad." "We were playing family," Sienna explained, without shyness. "I'm Maisie's older sister." "Only by 2 months," Maisie laughed. "We found out I was born in March and she was born in January." Clark blinked, surprised. He didn't know Maisie had made a friend, and by the looks of it, a friend who knew details about her that he himself sometimes forgot. "That's nice," he said, but his mind was already drifting back to work. He had missed an important meeting to be there. The phone vibrated in his pocket, but he resisted the urge to look. "Daddy, look what we made." Maisie pointed to a circle made of leaves and pebbles on the ground. "This is our house. Sienna and I are sisters. Elise is the mommy, and you can be the daddy." Clark looked at the game. He only saw leaves scattered on the ground, but in Maisie's eyes, there was a sparkle he hadn't seen in months. "It's creative," he said. "We pretended we had a dog too," Sienna added. "Jazz and a pool in the backyard, and a garden with flowers that never die," Maisie added. Elise continued to comb the girl's hair, observing Clark. She noticed the way he glanced at his watch, how his fingers fidgeted with the phone in his pocket, how he seemed to be somewhere else even though he was right there. "Well, I think it's time for us to go," Clark said. "So Maisie, grab your things." "But Daddy, we haven't finished making the backyard yet. You can finish it tomorrow." Clark was already walking toward the car. "Come on, the traffic is going to get heavy." Maisie got up slowly. She didn't want to leave. She wanted to stay longer playing family, inventing stories, laughing with Sienna. But she obeyed. "Bye, Sienna." "Bye, Elise." She hugged them both. "Thanks for playing with me." "See you tomorrow," Sienna said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "See you," Maisie confirmed, looking at her father to make sure she could promise that. Clark nodded politely at Elise and started walking toward the car. Maisie followed him but turned back several times, waving. In the car, as Clark started the engine, Maisie put on her seatbelt with a huge smile on her face. "Dad, that's Sienna and Elise. We played family." The words came out all at once, as if she couldn't contain her excitement. "Nice, honey," Clark replied, looking in the rearview mirror as he reversed. Maisie waited for him to say something more. to ask about Sienna, about the game, about how they met, but Clark just turned on the radio and started driving. "Sienna is my age," Maisie tried again. "And she's really nice. We invented a bunch of games." "That's good," Clark said, but Maisie could tell he was distracted. His eyes kept darting from the traffic to the phone on the passenger seat. "Aunt Elise made cookies for us. She said I can help make cookies at their house." Maisie looked at her dad. He was there, but he wasn't really listening. It was as if her words were just background noise, like the radio or the sound of the cars. She tried one more time. "Daddy, did you see how we were playing?" "I did." "Very nice." But Maisie knew he hadn't really seen. He hadn't seen how happy she was. He hadn't noticed how well she and Sienna got along. He hadn't noticed the affection with which Elise cared for them both. She rested her head against the window and fell silent. Clark drove for a few blocks before he realized Maisie had stopped talking. He looked in the rearview mirror and saw his daughter looking out the window, quiet. "Everything okay back there, Princess?" "Everything's fine," Maisie answered softly, but everything wasn't fine. She had just had one of the happiest days of her life. She had made an amazing friend. She had played at having a complete family, and her dad hadn't even really asked about any of it. How could he not understand that it was important? Clark sensed something was wrong but didn't know what. Maisie was quieter than usual. Maybe she was tired from playing in the park. The phone rang. It was from the office. "You can answer it, Dad," Maisie said, still looking out the window. "I know it's important." There was something in her tone of voice that made Clark hesitate, but the phone kept ringing, and he knew it was about the meeting he had cancelled. "Just a minute," he said, answering. "Oh, hello." Maisie closed her eyes and listened as her father's voice changed. It became more serious, more interested, more present. That's how he spoke when something really mattered. She thought of Elise, of the way she listened when they talked, the way she asked questions about their drawings, their games, their feelings, the way she truly paid attention. She thought of Sienna, who had listened to all her stories about school, about colors, about her dad who worked a lot, who had invented games just for them to play together. And she thought of her father, who was there in the car with her, but seemed to be on another planet. When they got home, Clark was still on the phone. He motioned for Maisie to go inside alone, that he'd be right in. Maisie entered the empty house and went straight to her room. She picked up the drawing of the green tree she had made the day before and looked at it for a long time. Then she took a blank sheet of paper and started to draw again. This time she drew two girls holding hands, a woman behind them, smiling, and a man on the side but turned the other way, talking on the phone. When she finished, she looked at the drawing and sighed. Sometimes people could be in the same place and yet very far from each other. And sometimes people you had just met could feel closer than people who lived in the same house with you. Maisie put the drawing in her drawer. Maybe tomorrow at the park, she would show it to Sienna and Elise, because they would understand. They always understood. Elise stood in the park for a few minutes after Clark and Maisie had left. Sienna had run off to the swings, but she remained there, looking in the direction the car had taken. There was something about the way Maisie's father had interacted with his daughter that bothered her. It wasn't malice. It was worse than that. It was indifference disguised as hurry. It was love that existed, but couldn't manifest itself properly. Elise knew this kind of situation well. "Mommy," Sienna called from the swing. "Hey, come push me." Elise walked over to her daughter, still lost in thought. She began to push the swing slowly, listening to Sienna chatter about all the things she and Maisie had talked about. She said her dad works a lot, that he's always busy. Sienna swung back and forth. "That's why she gets sad sometimes." "You noticed she gets sad." "I noticed." "She pretends she's not, but I noticed." Sienna looked back at her mother. "Why do dads do that, Mommy?" "Do what?" "Get so busy they forget we exist." The question caught Elise by surprise. Sienna had never made such a mature observation before, or maybe she had and Elise hadn't been paying attention. "Sometimes adults think that working a lot is their way of showing love," Elise said, choosing her words carefully. "They think that if they earn money, if they solve all the problems, then they'll have time for the important things. But that doesn't work, does it?" "It doesn't work." Sienna was quiet for a while, thinking. Maisie needs more hugs. She does. And someone who really listens to her. That too. That's why she liked us so much. Sienna stopped swinging and turned to her mother. We listened to her. Elise nodded, but something tightened in her chest. That was exactly what worried her. Maisie was getting attached to them because she lacked attention at home. And Sienna was getting attached to Maisie because she finally had a friend her own age. But what about her? Why was she getting involved? Throughout her life, Elise had learned to be careful with her feelings. She had built walls to protect herself. When she got pregnant with Sienna, the child's father disappeared overnight. He said he wasn't ready, that it wasn't the right time, that he couldn't handle the responsibility. She was left alone, completely alone. She learned not to depend on anyone, not to have expectations, not to open up too much, because people always ended up leaving when things got tough. She built a simple but safe life, her and Sienna, the two of them against the world. They didn't need anyone else, at least that's what she tried to believe. "Mummy, can Maisie come over for dinner tomorrow?" Sienna asked, pulling Elise from her thoughts. "I don't know, sweetie. That depends on her father." "But if he lets her, can she?" Elise hesitated. Inviting Maisie for dinner meant getting more involved. It meant creating bonds. And bonds could be broken. "We can talk about it," she said, avoiding a definitive answer. Sienna seemed satisfied and went back to swinging, but Elise remained uneasy. On the way home, Sienna didn't stop talking about Maisie, about how they had similar tastes, about how fun it was to have someone to play with, about how smart and funny Maisie was. "She's my best friend now," Sienna said when they got home. "You only met 2 days ago," Elise reminded her. "So what? Sometimes you know right away when you like someone." Sienna took off her shoes and threw them on the floor. "Didn't you like her too?" The question made Elise uncomfortable, because the answer was yes, she had liked Maisie. She liked her polite manner, her genuine curiosity, the way she looked at things with attention. But more than that, she had identified with the girl's loneliness, with the way Maisie tried to be strong even when she was hurt, with the way she accepted crumbs of attention as if they were treasures. Elise had been that child once. The daughter of parents too busy to notice she existed. She had learned to be independent too early. She had built walls to protect herself from indifference, and now she saw Maisie doing the same thing. "Yes, I did," Elise admitted. "She's a special girl." "Then why do you look so worried?" Sienna always noticed everything. It was impossible to hide anything from her. "I'm not worried. I'm just thinking." "Thinking about what?" "How do you explain to a 6-year-old that sometimes caring for someone hurts, that getting attached is dangerous, that when you let someone into your life, you become vulnerable?" "I'm thinking about dinner," Elise lied. "Or how about we make that pasta you like?" Sienna accepted the change of subject, but Elise remained restless. That night, after putting Sienna to bed, she was alone in the kitchen, thinking. She looked out the window and saw the neighborhood lights, each house with its own story, each family with its own problems. For years, she had been content to watch from a distance, not getting involved, not meddling in other people's lives, just taking care of herself and Sienna. But now there was Maisie, a child who needed attention, affection, someone who would really listen. And there was Clark, a father who loved his daughter, but didn't know how to show it, who was lost in his own worries. Elise could pretend it wasn't her problem. She could walk away before things got complicated. She could go back to the simple, safe life she had built, but she knew she couldn't, because it wasn't just Sienna who was getting attached to Maisie. She herself felt something different. She felt as if the walls she had built over the years were beginning to crack, as if a little light was seeping through the crevices. It was frightening, but it was also good. For the first time in a long time, Elise allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to have more people in her life, not just her and Sienna against the world, but a larger family, more complex, more risky, more real. She shook her head, trying to dismiss these thoughts. It was too soon to think such things. Maisie was just a child who needed a friend. Clark was just a busy father. But deep in her heart, Elise knew it was more than that. Something was happening. something she couldn't control, something she might not want to control. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't completely terrify her. Maybe it was time to let the walls come down a little, just a little. Clark was in the kitchen having coffee when he heard Maisie humming in her room. Humming. When was the last time she had done that? He stopped to listen. It was a song she had made up herself, something about sisters and parks and warm cookies. Her voice sounded different, lighter, happier. Over the past few days, Clark had noticed small changes in Maisie. She woke up more cheerful. She talked more during breakfast. She talked about school with more enthusiasm. And she always mentioned Sienna. Dad, Sienna said that chocolate chip cookies taste better if you add a pinch of salt. Dad, Sienna taught me a new game with pebbles. Dad, did you know that Sienna likes to draw too? She drew a family of butterflies. It was Sienna that... And Elise was also mentioned frequently, always with affection and admiration. Clark should have been happy. Maisie was more communicative than she had been in months, but there was something that bothered him, and he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Maybe it was the fact that strangers were influencing his daughter more than he was. Maybe it was jealousy disguised as concern, or maybe it was simply the feeling that he was missing something important in Maisie's life. Dad. Maisie appeared in the kitchen, already dressed for school. Can I bring cookies for Sienna today? We don't have any cookies, Clark said, looking in the cupboards. Oh. Maisie was disappointed for a second, but then she perked up again. That's okay. Elise always brings snacks for us anyway. Elise always brings snacks. Clark felt a strange pang in his chest. When was the last time he had prepared a special snack for Maisie? Maisie, he said, closing the cupboard. Tell me more about Sienna. Maisie's eyes lit up. You really want to know? I do. And so Maisie began to talk. She told him about how they met, about the games they invented, about how funny and smart Sienna was. She talked about Elise, about how she really listened, about how kind and caring she was. Clark listened to it all, and with every word the discomfort in his chest grew. It wasn't envy. It was something worse. It was the realization that other people were giving his daughter things he should have been giving her. Attention, presence, time. She seems nice, this Sienna, Clark said when Maisie finished. She's the best friend I've ever had. Maisie picked up her backpack. You'd like her, Dad. And Elise, too. On the way to school, Clark thought about the conversation. It had been a long time since Maisie had talked so much to him. It had been a long time since she had shown so much excitement about anything, and all of this had started after she met Sienna and Elise. When he dropped Maisie off at school, instead of going straight to the office, Clark stayed in the car for a few minutes, watching. He saw Maisie run towards the park, where two familiar figures were waiting for her. He saw how his daughter's face lit up when she saw Sienna. He saw how Elise hugged Maisie as if it were natural, as if it was something that happened every day. And he realized that, in a way, it was something that happened every day. While he was working, Maisie had built a new routine, a routine that included people he barely knew, but who clearly meant a lot to her. This left him unsettled for the rest of the day. On the way back from school, Maisie was particularly excited. Dad, Sienna and I made a joint drawing today. She drew one half and I drew the other half, and it turned out perfect. That's cool. And Elise brought cheese sandwiches with that bread that's kind of sweet. She said she made it especially for me, because she remembered I liked the other one. Clark felt that strange pang again. Elise remembered what Maisie liked. She did special things for her. When was the last time he had done something special for Maisie? Dad? Maisie interrupted his thoughts. Are you okay? I'm fine, Princess. Just thinking. Thinking about what? Clark looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror. She was playing with a folded drawing in her lap, smiling to herself. She was happy, genuinely happy. Maisie, he said suddenly, how about we invite Sienna and Elise over for dinner one of these days? Maisie looked up, surprised. Really? Really? When? I don't know. Maybe tomorrow, Maisie squealed with joy in the back seat. That would be amazing. They'll love our house. And I can show Sienna my room. And we can play family for real. Clark smiled. infected by his daughter's enthusiasm, but at the same time, he felt a knot in his stomach. What if they thought he was boring? What if he didn't know how to talk to them? What if it became obvious that he didn't know his own daughter as well as he should? The next day, when he went to pick up Maisie at the park, Clark approached Elise. "Excuse me," he said, a bit awkwardly. "Elise, right?" "That's right." She smiled, but Clark noticed a certain caution in her eyes. "I wanted to extend an invitation. Maisie has been talking so much about you guys that I thought, maybe you'd like to have dinner at our place tomorrow." Elise hesitated. Sienna, who had overheard the conversation, jumped with excitement. "Can we, Mommy, please?" "It's just a simple dinner," Clark said quickly. "Nothing fancy. Just so I can get to know the people who are important to Maisie better." There was something in the way he said it that touched Elise. A vulnerability she hadn't expected to see, as if he really wanted to make an effort but didn't know how. "That would be lovely," she said. "Thank you for the invitation." "Yay!" shouted Maisie and Sienna at the same time. The next day, Clark left work early to prepare dinner. He wasn't much of a cook, so he decided on something simple: pasta with tomato sauce, salad, and bread. He also bought some ice cream for dessert. As he cooked, he found himself getting nervous. When was the last time he had had people over? When was the last time he had worried about impressing someone? At 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Maisie ran to open the door. They're here," she shouted. Clark wiped his hands on a dish towel and went to greet the guests. Elise was at the gate with a container in her hands and Sienna by her side, holding a drawing. "I brought dessert," Elise said, offering the container. "Homemade pudding." "You didn't have to," Clark said, but he was touched by the gesture. "Please, come in." The house felt different with more people inside, less empty, less silent. "Wow," said Sienna, looking around. "Your house is beautiful, Maisie." "Want to see my room?" Maisie took her friend's hand. "Of course." The two girls ran upstairs, leaving Clark and Elise alone in the living room. "Nice house," Elise said politely. "Thanks." Clark suddenly felt uncomfortable. He didn't quite know what to say. "Would you like to sit? Dinner will be ready in a few minutes." They sat on the sofa, and for a moment they were silent, listening to the girls' laughter from upstairs. "Maisie is a special child," Elise said. "She is." Clark looked towards the stairs. "Says she's changed a lot since she met you guys." "How so?" "She's more alive, more talkative, happier." Clark hesitated. "I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing." Elise looked at him with curiosity. "Why would it be bad?" Clark didn't know how to answer. How could he explain that he was jealous of his own daughter's happiness? How could he say that he felt inadequate compared to the attention they gave Maisie? "It's not bad," he said finally. "It's just, I don't know if I'm a good father." The confession came out unexpectedly. Elise was surprised by his honesty. "Maisie loves you very much," she said gently. "She talks about you all the time." "She does." "She does. She says you work hard because you want to take care of her, that you try your best even when you're tired." Clark felt a strange sense of relief. "Sometimes I feel like I work so much that I forget to be present." Before Elise could answer, the girls came running down. "Dad, Sienna loved my room." Maisie was beaming. "And she showed me her book collection," Sienna said. "I didn't know she had so many." "Maisie is very smart," Clark said, smiling at his daughter. During dinner, the atmosphere gradually warmed up. Clark still seemed a bit tense, but the girls didn't give the mood a chance to get heavy. They told stories about school, about the games they invented, about the drawings they made. Sienna showed Clark the drawing she had brought, a family of 4 holding hands. "This is us," she explained. "Me, Maisie, Mommy, and you." Clark looked at the drawing for a long time. There was something moving in the simplicity of those colorful lines. "It's very beautiful," he said. After dinner, Maisie insisted on showing Sienna how to mix paint colors. They spread paper on the living room floor and started painting, while Clark and Elise did the dishes in the kitchen. "They get along so well," Elise said, watching the girls through the kitchen doorway. "Yes." Maisie has never had a friend like this. Clark rinsed a plate. She's always been kind of a loner. It sometimes takes a while for kids to find compatible people. What about you? Has Sienna always found it easy to make friends? Elise hesitated. Actually, no, we've always been kind of just the two of us. We don't have a big family, so Sienna wasn't used to other children. And now? Now she's happier too. Elise smiled. Sometimes people show up in our lives when we need them most. Clark looked at her. There was something in the way she spoke that made him realize she was also going through changes. That maybe she was also stepping out of her comfort zone because of this friendship. When they returned to the living room, they found the two girls creating a giant mural on the floor. There were drawings of houses, trees, animals, and in the center, 4 stick figures holding hands. "Look what we made," said Maisie. "It's our family," Sienna explained. "How the family we made up." Clark crouched down to get a better look. In the drawing, everyone was smiling, everyone looked happy. "It's beautiful," he said. The rest of the evening passed quickly. The girls played, told jokes, made up stories. Clark and Elise talked about work, about raising children, about everyday things. Nothing too deep, but enough to break the ice. When it was time to leave, Sienna and Maisie hugged as if they were going to be apart for months. "Thanks for dinner," Elise said to Clark at the door. "It was delicious." "Thanks for coming," he replied. And then, a bit awkwardly, he added, "It was good to have you here." Elise smiled, but Clark noticed that she kept a certain distance. It was as if she was being polite but didn't want to get too close. "We'll see you at the park tomorrow," she said, taking Sienna's hand. After they left, Clark and Maisie stood in the living room looking at the mural the girls had made. "It was nice, wasn't it, Dad?" "It was, Princess. Did you like them?" Clark thought for a moment. "I did. They're special people." "I told you you would," Maisie smiled. "They're like family to me." Clark felt that pang in his chest again, but this time it was different. It wasn't discomfort. It was hope, possibility. "Dad?" "Yes." "Thank you for inviting them." "You're welcome, Princess." That night, after putting Maisie to bed, Clark stood in the living room looking at the drawing the girls had made. 4 people holding hands. An imaginary family, but one that somehow felt real. He thought about Elise, about how she cared for the 2 girls with such affection. He thought about Sienna, about how she brought joy into Maisie's life. He thought about his own daughter, about how she was blossoming, and for the first time in a long time, Clark allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to have a bigger family. Not just him and Maisie against the world, but something more complex, richer, more complete. It was a frightening thought. But it was also good. Maybe it was time to stop working so much and start living a little more. Clark glanced at the clock on the car's dashboard, 3:15 in the afternoon. He still had time to go back to the office after picking up Maisie, but he didn't want to. In the last few days, something had changed inside him. It was as if a dormant part of him had woken up. Since the dinner with Elise and Sienna, he couldn't stop thinking. Not about the meetings or the reports he had to deliver. He thought about Maisie, about how she had shone that night, about how naturally she laughed when Sienna was around, about how she seemed more herself. He parked near the school and waited. When he saw Maisie coming out of the gate, he waved. She ran to him with a huge smile. "Daddy, you came again?" "I did." Clark opened the door for her. "How was school today?" "It was good. The teacher said my drawing was very beautiful. And at recess, Emma and I played jump rope." Clark drove slowly, paying attention to every word. "What drawing did you make?" "A family. Just like the one Sienna and I made at home." Maisie fiddled with her backpack. "Want to see?" "I do." Maisie took out a folded sheet of paper and showed it to him. It was a colorful drawing of 4 figures holding hands, with a house in the background and a yellow sun in the sky. "It's very beautiful, Princess." Clark looked in the rearview mirror. "Hey, tell me more about this family in the drawing." "Well," Maisie became thoughtful, "there's the daddy who works a lot but is learning to play more. There's the girl who likes to draw and invent games. There's the other girl who is her best friend. And there's the mommy who makes cookies and listens to people. Clark felt a tightness in his chest. And are they happy? They are, because they stick together and take care of each other. They drove in silence for a few blocks. Clark was processing what Maisie had said. A family that takes care of each other, that sticks together, that is happy. Maisie, he said suddenly, are you happy? The question came out more directly than he intended. Maisie was surprised. I am, Dad. Why? Just wanted to know. Clark hesitated. And do you feel taken care of? Maisie thought for a moment. I do now. Now. Since I met Sienna and Elise, and since you started picking me up from school more often, she smiled. You're different, Dad. Different how? More present. Before, you always seemed to be thinking about other things. Now you really listen to me. Clark swallowed hard. It was true. He had been trying to be more present in the last few days, to ask questions, to listen to the answers. Dad? Yes. Do you think Sienna can come over to play today? Clark was about to automatically say maybe another day when he remembered the conversation they had just had, about being present, about really listening. Of course, he said. Let's stop by the park to invite her and Elise. Really? Maisie clapped her hands. This is going to be amazing. When they arrived at the park, Sienna and Maisie greeted each other as if they hadn't seen each other in days instead of hours. Elise smiled at Clark. Came to pick up Maisie in person again, she observed. I'm trying to be more present, Clark said, a bit awkwardly. It's good to see. Elise, said Sienna, pulling on her mother's sleeve. Can Maisie's dad talk to you? Clark looked at the girl, surprised. How do you know I want to talk to your mum? Because you have that look on your face, like you have something important to say, Sienna replied with complete naturalness. Elise laughed. She always notices these things. Go play with Maisie, sweetie. I'll talk to Clark. The two girls ran off to the swings. Clark and Elise sat on a nearby bench. How do you know what to do? Clark asked suddenly. What do you mean? With a child. How to be a father or a mother. How to know if you're doing it right. Elise looked at him attentively. How do you think you're doing it wrong? Clark sighed. I don't know how to be a dad. Not really. The words came out laden with a vulnerability he rarely showed. Elise was silent for a moment, watching the girls play. You've already started just by admitting that, she said finally. Dad, what do you mean? Most parents who do everything wrong think they're doing everything right. The fact that you're questioning yourself, that you're trying to change, that you're here, that's already a start. Clark absorbed her words. Sometimes I feel like I work so hard to give her a good life that I forget to live that life with her. It's easy to fall into that trap, Elise said gently. But Maisie doesn't need a perfect life. She needs you. And what if I don't know how to do that? Nobody knows at the beginning. We learn as we go. Elise smiled. And Maisie is a very good teacher. She'll teach you what she needs if you're willing to listen. Clark looked at his daughter, who was laughing as Sienna pushed her swing. She's changed so much since she met you two, he said. You've changed us too, Elise confessed. Sienna never had a friend like Maisie, and well, it had been a long time since I felt part of something bigger. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the girls play. It was strange how this friendship between children was transforming all of their lives. Elise, Clark said, Maisie asked me if Sienna could come over to play at our house today. Would you be up for that? Of course. Sienna would love that. When they told the girls, they screamed with joy. On the way home, Clark stopped at a bakery. How about we buy a special snack for you girls, he suggested. Really? Maisie looked at him with surprise. You're going to buy a snack? I am. Pick whatever you want. The girls spent long minutes deciding between cupcakes, cookies, and sandwiches. They ended up choosing a little of everything. Clark paid without complaining about the price, smiling at their excitement. At home, the girls settled in the living room with their snacks and began to play. Clark and Elise sat in the kitchen for coffee. Thank you, Clark said. For what? For helping me understand a few things. You didn't need help to understand. You just needed time to process. Clark chuckled softly. My ex-wife always said I thought too much instead of feeling. It was the first time he had mentioned Maisie's mother to Elise. She remained silent, respecting the moment. She was right, Clark continued. When she died, I closed myself off even more. I thought that if I worked hard enough, if I solved all the practical problems, the pain would go away, and that Maisie would be fine. And did the pain go away? No. It just got tucked away somewhere, and Maisie, I realized she wasn't fine. She was just pretending to be out just like me. Elise nodded. Children learn to do that when they feel the adults can't handle the truth. That's terrible. It is, but it's reversible. They heard laughter coming from the living room. Sienna was telling a dramatic story about a dragon who was afraid of butterflies, and Maisie was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. Look at that, Elise said. She's allowing herself to be a child again. Clark watched his daughter for a long time. It was true. There was a lightness about Maisie he hadn't seen in years. I want to learn, he said. I want to be the father she deserves. You already are, Elise said. You just need to believe it. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly. The girls played 1,000 different things, drawing, making up stories, building forts with pillows. Clark joined in a few times, feeling awkward at first, but gradually loosening up. When it was time for dinner, he suggested they order pizza. Pizza, the girls shouted in unison. You can pick the toppings, Clark said to Sienna. You're our guest. Sienna looked serious for a moment, as if it were an important responsibility. How about half pepperoni and half margarita? Perfect choice, Clark approved. During dinner, the girls talked about school, about friends, about dreams. Clark listened to every word, asking questions, laughing at the jokes, truly engaging. Elise watched it all with a discreet smile. It was beautiful to see Clark discovering himself as a father. After dinner, the girls wanted to play house in Maisie's room. Clark and Elise stayed in the living room, talking about everyday things, but Clark noticed there was something comfortable in that simplicity. When it was time for Elise and Sienna to leave, Maisie was sad. Can she sleep over? She asked. Not today, sweetie, Elise said, but another day, maybe. Promise? I promise. The girls hugged for a long time at the door. After Elise and Sienna left, Clark helped Maisie get ready for bed. Dad, she said as he tucked her in, today was one of the best days of my life. Why? Because you stayed with me the whole time. And because Sienna was here, and because... She hesitated. Because it felt like we were a real family. Clark's heart ached. We've always been a family, Princess. I know, but today it felt bigger, more complete. Clark kissed his daughter's forehead. Sleep well. He was almost out of the room when he heard Maisie call him. Dad? Yes. Thanks for buying snacks today and for letting Sienna come play and for being here. Thank you for teaching me how, Clark replied. He went downstairs to the living room and looked at the drawings the girls had made, scattered on the sofa. Smiling families, houses with gardens, bright suns. For the first time in a long time, Clark felt at peace. Upstairs, in her room, Maisie lay in bed looking at the ceiling. She thought about the day, about how perfect it had been. Then she whispered into the darkness, as if Sienna could hear. We could be sisters, you know. And in her imagination, she heard her friend's voice reply with that special smile. We already are, just by heart. Maisie smiled and closed her eyes, feeling complete for the first time in a long time. It was a Friday afternoon, and the girls had gone to Sienna's grandmother's house for the weekend. Elise was at the park, sitting alone on the bench where she used to sit with them, when she saw Clark approaching. Hi, he said, a bit hesitantly. May I sit? Of course. Clark sat next to her, leaving a respectful space between them. They were silent for a few minutes, watching other families play. Strange, the park without them, isn't it? Clark commented. It is. Too quiet. Elise smiled. Sienna said she was going to teach her grandma all the games she invented here. Maisie was excited too. Said she was going to show Grandma how to make green trees by mixing blue and yellow. They chuckled softly, imagining the two old women trying to keep up with their granddaughter's energy. "Clark," Elise said suddenly, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "When you talked about your ex-wife the other day, what was it like?" "Losing her, I mean..." Clark tensed for a moment. It was a question no one asked directly. People usually avoided the subject or just offered empty condolences. "It was devastating," he said softly. "It wasn't gradual, it was sudden." Elise waited, sensing he needed time to find the words. "It was a normal morning," Clark continued. "Sarah was making breakfast. Maisie was at the table, complaining that she didn't want to go to school. Sarah laughed and said that all kids have to go to school, even princesses." His voice got lower. Then she collapsed, just like that. A brain aneurysm. "The doctors said she probably didn't feel any pain, that it was quick." Elise held her breath. "But for me and Maisie, for us, it was like the world had stopped." Clark looked at his own hands. "One moment she was there, laughing, making plans for the weekend. The next, I was at the hospital being told she had died. Oh my God, Clark. Maisie was 4 years old. She kept asking when Mommy was coming home, and I didn't know how to explain that she was never coming back." Elise felt her eyes well up. "In the first few months, I tried to be strong," Clark continued. "I thought that if I didn't fall apart, if I kept the routine, if I worked hard to make sure Maisie didn't need anything, I thought that would be enough. But it wasn't. It wasn't. Maisie cried every night. I worked late so I wouldn't have to deal with my own tears. We became two people pretending to be okay." Clark stopped talking. Elise realized he was fighting back emotion. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "I can't imagine how hard that must have been. The worst part is that I never let Maisie process it properly. Whenever she started talking about her mom, I'd change the subject. I thought if we didn't talk about the pain, it would go away." "And did it go away?" Clark laughed humorlessly. "Of course not. It just got bottled up inside, in Maisie and in me." They sat in silence. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the tree above them. "And you?" Clark asked. "What happened with Sienna's father?" Elise hesitated. She didn't usually talk about it, but after Clark had shared something so intimate, she felt she could trust him. "It wasn't death," she said. "It was abandonment, which sometimes hurts just as much." Clark looked at her attentively. "When I found out I was pregnant, I thought he'd be happy. We had been dating for 2 years. We talked about the future, about kids, about getting married." Elise fidgeted with her hands nervously. "But when I told him, his reaction was different from what I expected. He went pale, said he wasn't ready, that it wasn't the right time. And then he disappeared, literally. Moved to another city, changed jobs, blocked my phone number, as if me and the coming child were a problem he could solve by simply ignoring us." Clark felt a surge of anger in his chest. What a coward. "At first, I thought he would come back, that when he saw Sienna, when he realized what he was missing. But he never came back." "Does Sienna ask about him?" "She used to. At first, I always said her daddy lived far away and couldn't come to visit. But she stopped asking." Elise sighed. "I think she realized it made me sad." "Were you angry?" "I was, for a long time. Angry at him. Angry at myself for believing him. Angry at the world." Elise looked at the park. "But anger gets tiring, you know. After a while you realize you're wasting energy hating someone who doesn't even care enough to know you exist." Clark nodded. "I understand. So I decided I would be strong, that I would handle everything on my own, that I didn't need anyone." Elise smiled sadly. "I built a life where it was just me and Sienna. Safe, predictable, no risks. No people who could hurt you again." "Exactly." They sat in silence for a long time. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange. "Funny," Clark said. "I learned to pretend I was okay to protect Maisie. You learned to pretend you didn't need anyone to protect Sienna. And in the end, we just taught them they had to pretend too. Until they met each other." Elise smiled. "Yeah, they don't pretend anything. They just are. And they forced us to stop pretending too." Clark looked at Elise. There was something different in the air between them. An understanding that hadn't existed before, an intimacy born from sharing old pains. "Elise," he said softly, "are you still afraid of opening up to someone?" "I am," she admitted. "And you? Do you still feel guilty about moving on?" "I do, like it's a betrayal. But are you tired of pretending?" Clark thought about the question. "I am. Very tired. Me too." They looked each other in the eyes. It had been years since Clark had felt so seen by someone. It had been years since Elise had felt so understood. "I don't know how to do this," Clark said. "I don't know how to stop being afraid." "Me neither, but maybe we can learn together." Clark slowly reached out his hand. Elise looked at it for a moment, hesitated, and then placed her hand in his. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was something deeper than that. It was the recognition of two people who had carried their pain alone for too long. It was permission to stop pretending. They stayed like that, holding hands as the sun finished setting. They didn't need to speak. The words had already been said. The wounds had been brought into the light. And for the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. "Clark," Elise said softly. "Yes. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for not running away." Elise chuckled softly. "Where would I run? My legs are shaking." Clark laughed too. "Does mine too." When they finally got up to leave, something had changed between them. It wasn't love yet. It was something more subtle, more delicate. It was the possibility of love. It was the courage to try again. It was the first step toward healing wounds that had been open for too long. And it was the beginning of something neither of them had dared to imagine. A second chance at happiness. 3 months later, the park meetups had turned into something much bigger. There were no more set times or formal invitations. It was natural. Clark would leave work and stop by the park. Elise would arrive with Sienna and wait for Maisie to appear. The girls would run to each other as if they had been separated for years. And the adults, they had also learned to smile when they saw each other. "Daddy, it's Friday," Maisie said as Clark drove towards the park. "Pizza day." "Pizza day?" Clark confirmed, smiling. Friday had become the official pizza day at his house. The four of them would get together, order pizza, watch a movie, and the girls would have a sleepover in the living room. "Sienna said Elise bought chocolate ice cream," Maisie continued, "and that it has brownie bits inside." "How luxurious." "It is. Elise always buys yummy things." Maisie grew thoughtful. "Dad, do you think we're a family now?" The question caught Clark by surprise. He looked in the rearview mirror and saw his daughter waiting for a serious answer. "What do you think?" he returned. "I think so. We do family things. We have dinner together, watch movies together, worry about each other." Maisie swung her legs. "And Sienna and I are sisters by heart." "Sisters by heart." "Yeah, we made it up. It means that even though we're not sisters by blood, we love each other like sisters." Clark smiled. "I like that idea. And it means our family gets bigger, but it never gets broken." At the park, Elise and Sienna were already waiting. Sienna ran to hug Maisie, and the two immediately started making plans for the evening. "Today we can play a new kind of house," Sienna said excitedly. "What new kind of house?" Maisie asked. "The house with 2 mummies and 2 bedrooms, 1 mummy for each room. But we sleep in the same room because we're sisters." Maisie clapped her hands. "And the daddies? The daddies work together and have a barbecue on Sundays. And do we have a dog?" "Of course, a golden retriever that loves to play fetch, and a garden with flowers that never die, and a little pool for the summer." Clark and Elise glanced at each other, smiling. The girls had imagined a life that they themselves hadn't yet had the courage to verbalize. "You two have already planned our whole lives," Elise joked. "Yeah," Sienna said seriously, "because you guys are too slow to plan." "Slow how?" Clark asked. "You keep looking at each other and smiling, but you don't say anything important," Maisie explained. "We already know you like each other." Elise turned red. Clark cleared his throat, embarrassed. "We're kids, but we're not blind," Sienna added. And you always stand close to each other, Maisie continued. And Daddy smiles differently when Elise is around. And Mommy sings in the shower on the days we're going to see you, Sienna completed. Hey, all right, girls, Clark said. How about we go home and get that pizza? On the way, the girls in the back seat made elaborate plans. Clark and Elise drove in the front, listening and exchanging glances. They don't mince words, Elise whispered. Not at all, Clark agreed. But they're not wrong. Elise looked at him. About what? About us liking each other. It was the first time Clark had said it out loud. Elise felt her heart race. Clark, I know, we'll take it slow. There's no rush. He smiled. But they're right. We do like each other. Like each other a lot, Elise whispered. Clark felt a wave of relief. A lot, he agreed. At home, while they waited for the pizza to arrive, the girls settled in the living room to draw. Clark and Elise were in the kitchen, preparing juice and setting out plates. You're different, Elise commented, observing Clark. How so? You're lighter. You smile more. Clark stopped stirring the juice and looked at her. You're different too. How? More open, less guarded. Elise laughed. Less neurotic, you mean? Not neurotic, just protected. Now you allow yourself more. It was true. Elise had noticed a subtle but profound change. She laughed louder. She made long-term plans. She let Sienna have sleepovers. It's strange, she said, to spend so much time taking care of just me and Sienna, that when other people enter the equation, it's like learning to breathe again. I know exactly what you mean. Before, I thought that if I needed someone, it would make me weak. And now I realize that letting someone take care of me is also a form of strength. The doorbell rang. Pizza. During dinner, the table was filled with laughter. Sienna told a story about a mix-up that had happened at school. Maisie showed a drawing she had made of a dragon wearing glasses. Clark told a story about a co-worker who had fallen asleep during a meeting. It was silly, everyday conversation, but there was something magical in the simplicity of being there, the four of them, sharing pizza and stories. Daddy, Maisie said suddenly, are you happy? The question came out of nowhere, but Clark didn't hesitate. I am, Princess. Very happy, happier than before. Clark looked at Elise, then at Sienna, and finally at Maisie. Much happier than before. That's good, Maisie said. You deserve to be happy. You all deserve to be happy, Clark said. We really do, Sienna agreed. Because we're a good family. The best family, Maisie said. We're the one most full of love, Elise finished, looking at the three most important people in her life. After dinner, while the girls watched a movie in the living room, Clark and Elise washed the dishes together. It was a routine they had developed naturally. He washed, she dried. Clark, Elise said, drying a plate. Do you think it's possible to be happy again? The question came out softly, laden with vulnerability. Clark stopped washing the dishes and looked at her. I think we already are, he replied. Elise smiled. It was a simple answer, but filled with truth. Yeah, she said. I think you're right. Do you know when I realized I was happy again? When? The day I came home and Maisie asked me how my day was, and I actually wanted to tell her. Clark rinsed another plate. Before, I always lied. I'd say it was good, even when it was terrible. But that day I really wanted to share. And what did you tell her? That I had presented an important project and that it had gone well, and that during the meeting, I had thought of you three, and it had given me confidence. She's wise. They both are. Sometimes I feel like they're the ones teaching us about family. Clark dried his hands and turned to her. For a moment, they stood there looking at each other. There was so much they wanted to say, but words seemed unnecessary. Dad! Elise! Maisie shouted from the living room. Come and see. They returned to the living room, where the girls had settled on the sofa with blankets. Clark and Elise sat on the ends, with the girls in the middle. During the movie, Sienna ended up resting her head on Clark's shoulder. Maisie did the same with Elise. And slowly, The four of them settled in until they were all squeezed together on the sofa, like a real family. The following Saturday, they decided to have a picnic in the park. Clark bought sandwiches, Elise made lemonade, and the girls prepared a basket of fruit. They spread a blanket under the same tree where Elise had offered the first sandwich to Maisie. The girls played sisters, pretending they had a tree house. Clark and Elise sat on a nearby bench, watching. They didn't need to talk all the time. They had learned to be comfortable in each other's silence. "Look at them," Elise said, watching the girls share a sandwich on the ground. "Remember when you said you didn't know how to be a father?" "I remember. Look at Maisie now. Look how secure, happy, and whole she is." Clark watched his daughter. It was true. Maisie shone in a way he hadn't seen in years. "You taught me a lot," he said to Elise. "No. You already knew. You just needed permission to be who you've always been. Permission. To make mistakes. To learn. To not have all the answers." Elise smiled. "When we met, you thought you had to be perfect all the time. And you thought you had to do everything alone. Yeah, we were exhausted from so much pressure. And now we share everything. The responsibilities, the joys, the fears." They sat in silence, sharing a look full of peace. There was no hurry, no anxiety. It was a silence filled with gratitude. "Elise! Clark!" Maisie shouted from the tree. "Come here." They approached. The girls were sitting side by side, pointing to the exact spot where Elise had offered the first piece of sandwich. "This is where it all started, right?" Maisie said, looking at Elise. Elise smiled, remembering that day. A lonely girl waiting for her father, a woman with an extra sandwich, a simple gesture that had changed all their lives. It was, with just a small piece. A small piece that turned into a whole family, Sienna added. "Yeah," Maisie said. "And sometimes big things start out small." Clark looked at Elise, small and warm. Elise laughed, and offered with care. "As everything should be," Clark completed. "And they grow slowly," Maisie said thoughtfully, "like plants." "Like plants?" Sienna asked. "Yeah. First you plant a tiny seed, then it becomes a little sprout, then a small plant. And one day you look, and it has turned into a big tree." "And our family is like a tree?" Sienna asked. "It is. We started out small, and now we are big and strong." Clark was moved by his daughter's analogy. "And trees take care of each other," he said. "How?" Maisie asked. "The roots get intertwined underground. When one tree needs water, the others share. When one gets sick, the others help. Just like us," said Sienna. "Just like us," Elise confirmed. "And when a tree is sad, the others provide shade for it," Maisie added. "And when there's a storm, they protect each other," Sienna said. They stayed there for another hour, talking about the past, making plans for the future, living in the present. The girls took imaginary photos with tree branches. Clark tried to explain how ants organize themselves. Elise told stories about when she was a child. When the sun began to set, they packed up their things to leave. In the car, Sienna and Maisie fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from playing so much. "They're happy," Elise whispered. "They are. And so are we." Clark drove slowly, wanting to prolong the moment. At Elise's house, as he helped carry a sleeping Sienna to her room. At his house, Elise helped put Maisie to bed. At the door, before Elise left, they said goodbye with a hug. It wasn't the first hug, but it was different from the others. Longer, more complete. "Clark," Elise said, still in the hug. Thank you." "For what?" "For letting me be part of your family. Thank you for letting us be part of yours." When Elise left, Clark stood at the door, watching until her car's lights disappeared. Then he went upstairs to check on Maisie. She was awake, looking at the ceiling. "Dad?" "Yes, Princess. Today was a perfect day. It really was, Dad." "I love you. And I love Elise and Sienna too. I love you all too." "Does that mean we're a real family now?" Clark kissed his daughter's forehead. "We always were, Princess. It just took a little while to grow." Maisie smiled and closed her eyes. Clark went down to the living room and looked out the window. Outside, the neighborhood lights shone as always, but now they didn't seem so distant anymore. It hadn't been love at first sight. It hadn't been an overwhelming passion or grand romantic gestures. It had been care, consistency, kindness, a sandwich offered to a lonely child, questions asked with genuine attention. Presence when someone needed it, patience with old fears, understanding of wounds that wouldn't heal, small gestures, repeated day after day until they transformed into something bigger. And that, Clark realized, was love. The kind of love